I'm not going to lie, when I first saw the headline pop up on my screen, I actually stopped what I was doing and just stared at it. For a second, I thought it had to be a mistake, but then the notifications kept coming, one after another: breaking alerts, social media posts, analysts posting threads, military commentators reacting in real time, and the headline that everyone was suddenly talking about read something like this: Moments ago, Iran strikes 2 Israeli jets allegedly targeting a secret bunker connected to Mojtaba Khamenei. Now think about that for a second. 2 Israeli fighter jets, a secret bunker, and the name Mojtaba Khamenei. If you follow global politics even a little bit, you already know that combination of words is explosive. And the moment I saw it, I realized something immediately. If even part of this story was true, the entire geopolitical balance of the Middle East could be shifting right in front of us. So I did what most people probably did in that moment. I started digging, because within minutes the internet was already in chaos. People on social media were arguing about what actually happened. Some posts claimed the jets were shot down. Others said they were intercepted. Some insisted the entire story was misinformation spreading faster than anyone could verify. And yet the conversation kept getting louder. Hashtags started trending. Commentators began speculating. Military analysts were suddenly appearing on television explaining how something like this could theoretically happen. And I remember sitting there thinking, this is exactly how modern geopolitical crises start. Not with a clear announcement, not with a formal statement, but with a single headline that spreads across the internet like wildfire. Within minutes, millions of people are reading it. Within an hour, the entire world is debating it. And suddenly, everyone is asking the same question: is this real? Because if it is, then something very serious just happened. Now here's the thing that really caught my attention. It wasn't just the claim about the jets. It was the alleged target, a secret bunker tied to Mojtaba Khamenei. That detail alone made analysts pause, because targeting a site connected to someone at that level of influence inside Iran's power structure isn't just another military operation. That kind of move would send a message, a very loud message. And historically, whenever tensions between Iran and Israel escalate, the entire region feels the ripple effects. Energy markets react, governments issue warnings, military forces quietly go on alert. And that's why the moment I saw that headline, I knew this story wasn't going to stay small. Because when the words Iran, Israel, and leadership target appear in the same sentence, the world starts paying attention. But the deeper I started looking into the situation, the more complicated the story became, because the internet was already flooded with different versions of events, different interpretations, different theories. Some people were convinced this was a massive escalation. Others insisted it was a misunderstanding, amplified by social media. And somewhere between those two extremes, the real story was still unfolding. But the part that truly stunned me wasn't the headline itself. It was what intelligence analysts started saying just minutes later. Because according to several early discussions, the alleged target of this operation might have been far more significant than most people initially realized. And if that was true, then this situation had the potential to become much bigger than anyone expected. But to understand why this moment is so serious, you have to understand the history behind it. Let me step back for a moment and explain something that often gets lost in the chaos of breaking news. The tension between Iran and Israel didn't start yesterday. It didn't start last year. In reality, this rivalry has been building for decades, and if you listen to analysts who study the region, they often describe it as something closer to a shadow war, a conflict that exists constantly beneath the surface. Sometimes it shows itself through cyber attacks, sometimes through proxy conflicts in other countries, and occasionally through mysterious incidents that suddenly make global headlines. Now, when people hear about tensions in the Middle East, they often imagine traditional warfare, missiles, armies, battles on the ground. But the reality is usually far more complicated. Modern geopolitical conflicts are often fought in quieter ways: intelligence operations, strategic deterrence, covert actions designed to send messages without triggering full-scale war. And that's why stories involving military aircraft, secret facilities, or leadership targets instantly grab the attention of global observers. Because those kinds of incidents don't happen in isolation. They happen within a much larger strategic game, a game where every move is calculated, every signal is analyzed, and every action has potential consequences far beyond the immediate moment. Think of it like a massive chess match playing out on the world stage, except instead of chess pieces, the players are dealing with real military capabilities, real alliances, real human lives, and when something unexpected happens in that environment, analysts immediately start asking the same question. Was this intentional escalation, or was it something else entirely? Now here's why the alleged details in this story caused such a strong reaction online. If Israeli aircraft were indeed targeting a location tied to a figure as influential as Mojtaba Khamenei, that suggests a very specific type of strategic calculation. Because in geopolitics, leadership figures represent more than individuals. They represent power structures, symbolism, influence networks, and any operation connected to those figures instantly becomes politically sensitive. But at the same time, this is also where the situation becomes incredibly complicated. Because during fast-moving events, information spreads faster than verification. One post leads to another. A rumor becomes a headline becomes a global debate, and before anyone has fully confirmed the details, millions of people are already reacting emotionally. That's the reality of the modern information environment. We're living in a time where a single claim can travel around the world in seconds, and sometimes the truth takes a little longer to catch up. So as I continued watching the story unfold, I realized something important. This wasn't just a story about military jets or secret bunkers. It was a story about how the modern world processes geopolitical tension in real time. Through social media, through speculation, through thousands of voices trying to interpret events as they happen. And the more analysts started discussing the alleged target of this operation, the more attention one name kept attracting: Mojtaba Khamenei. Because inside Iran's political system, his influence has been the subject of intense discussion for years, which raises an important question. Why would a location connected to him matter so much in the context of regional power dynamics? And that's exactly where the story takes its next dramatic turn. Because once you understand who Mojtaba Khamenei is believed to be within Iran's leadership circles, you begin to understand why this alleged incident triggered such an immediate global reaction. And trust me, what I discovered next completely changed how I looked at the entire situation. So after seeing the headline, after watching the internet explode with speculation, I realized there was one question I needed to answer before anything else. Who exactly is Mojtaba Khamenei? Because the more analysts kept mentioning his name, the clearer it became that he wasn't just another political figure. Inside Iran's complex power structure, his name carries serious weight. Now, if you're someone who doesn't follow Middle Eastern politics every day, you might not hear about him often in Western media. He tends to stay out of the spotlight compared to other leaders. But behind the scenes, many observers have long believed that Mojtaba Khamenei holds enormous influence within Iran's political and security circles. And that's what makes his name so intriguing whenever it appears in discussions like this. Iran's political system isn't structured exactly like Western governments. Power flows through a mix of institutions: religious leadership, military structures, political bodies, and deeply rooted ideological networks, and individuals connected to those systems can shape policy in ways that outsiders rarely see directly. For years, analysts have debated how much influence Mojtaba Khamenei actually holds. Some believe he plays a quiet but powerful role behind the scenes. Others say his influence is exaggerated by speculation. But regardless of where you stand in that debate, one thing is clear: his name carries symbolic weight. So when a headline claims that a location tied to him might have been targeted, even indirectly, it immediately raises eyebrows across diplomatic and intelligence communities. Because targeting locations connected to leadership figures is rarely just about geography. It's about messaging. It's about signaling strength. It's about demonstrating capability. In geopolitics, every action sends a signal. Sometimes that signal is meant for domestic audiences. Sometimes it's meant for rivals. And sometimes it's meant for the entire world. So when the story began circulating that Israeli aircraft were allegedly involved in a strike targeting a bunker connected to Mojtaba Khamenei, you can imagine how quickly analysts began dissecting the possibility. If true, it would represent a dramatic moment in the long-running shadow conflict between Iran and Israel. But here's where things became even more complicated. Because at the same time that some voices were treating the story as a major escalation, other experts were urging caution. They pointed out that early reports during geopolitical crises are often incomplete, sometimes entirely wrong, and they reminded everyone watching that the internet has a way of turning speculation into certainty long before the facts are confirmed. And as I sat there reading analysis after analysis, refreshing news feeds, watching experts debate the possibilities, I started noticing something interesting. The story itself was evolving. New claims were appearing, new interpretations were spreading, and suddenly the question wasn't just about the alleged bunker anymore. Now, people were arguing about something even bigger, the aircraft themselves, because some voices online were now claiming something dramatic. They were saying that Iranian defenses may have actually struck Israeli jets. And if that claim were true, it would represent a completely different level of confrontation. But before anyone could fully process that possibility, the story took another turn. And what happened next made the entire situation even more confusing. By this point, the internet had officially entered what I can only describe as full speculation mode. If you've ever watched a breaking geopolitical story unfold online, you know exactly what that looks like. One post appears, then another. Then suddenly thousands of people are sharing maps, satellite images, defense analysis threads, and personal interpretations of what they think happened. That's exactly what started happening here. Within hours, timelines were filling up with conflicting reports. Some posts insisted that Israeli jets had been intercepted. Others said the aircraft had returned safely. Some claimed advanced air defense systems were involved. Others argued that the entire story was being exaggerated. And as the debate grew louder, something else started happening. The conversation began spreading far beyond the original headline. Now analysts were discussing the broader military balance in the region. Questions started appearing like, how effective are regional air defense systems? What capabilities do different countries actually have? How would modern fighter aircraft operate in contested airspace? Suddenly, what started as a single dramatic headline had turned into a global conversation about military technology, strategy, and deterrence. And that's when I realized something fascinating about the modern information age. Stories don't just spread anymore. They evolve, they grow, they transform as millions of people add their own interpretations. Some of those interpretations are thoughtful and analytical, others are emotional reactions, and some are simply guesses. But together they create something powerful, a global discussion happening in real time. As I kept watching the situation unfold, I noticed military analysts approaching the story very differently from social media commentators. Instead of jumping to conclusions, they were asking careful questions. What evidence actually exists? What sources are confirming details? What information still needs verification? And that difference in approach really stood out to me. Because in moments like this, when tensions are high and information is moving quickly, separating confirmed facts from speculation becomes incredibly important. Yet at the same time, you could feel the tension in the conversation, because even the possibility of something like this happening carries huge implications. If aircraft had truly been targeted in such a sensitive context, the political fallout would be enormous. Regional leaders would have to respond. Military planners would reassess risks. Diplomatic channels would likely become extremely active behind the scenes. And while none of that was confirmed yet, the mere possibility was enough to make the world pay attention. But what fascinated me most wasn't just the speculation itself, it was how people everywhere were reacting to it. Because while analysts debated strategy and journalists chased verification, millions of ordinary people were watching the same story unfold on their phones, commenting, sharing, arguing, trying to understand what it all meant. And that's when the story began entering its next phase. Because once global audiences started reacting, the ripple effects spread far beyond military analysis. Suddenly, this wasn't just a geopolitical story anymore. It had become a global conversation, and the reactions pouring in from around the world were almost as dramatic as the headline itself. As I sit here reflecting on everything we've talked about today, one thing becomes very clear to me. In the modern world, moments like this remind us just how fragile global stability can be. A single headline can spread across the planet in seconds. One claim, one rumor, one breaking alert, and suddenly millions of people are watching the same story unfold, trying to understand what it really means. But what I think matters most isn't just the headline itself, it's how we respond to it. In times of tension, it's easy to get caught up in fear, speculation, and emotional reactions. Yet history shows us that the strongest societies are the ones that step back, seek the truth, and refuse to let chaos or misinformation control the narrative. Events in the world will always change. Conflicts will rise and fall, alliances will shift, and headlines will come and go. But the values that guide us, the commitment to truth, responsibility, and human dignity, those are the things that should never change. If there's one lesson I take away from stories like this, it's that awareness matters, understanding the world matters, and staying thoughtful in the middle of global noise matters more than ever. So wherever you're watching from today, remember this: the future isn't written by rumors or viral headlines. It's shaped by informed people who choose to look deeper, ask better questions, and care about what happens beyond their own borders. Thank you for taking the time to watch, think, and be part of this conversation. And if discussions like this matter to you, make sure you stay connected, because in a world that changes this fast, the next story could be just around the corner.